We've been looking at foundations for society, what makes a healthy society from the book of Genesis. And today, I want to talk about a sermon that's going to include every one of us, including your pastor. And it's a sermon about how dysfunctional are you. You may not want to hear that sermon. But as we revisit these foundations, there's almost a prayer in this passage that says, God bless my dysfunctional family. And I'm going to suggest to you, because of the fall of mankind, everyone is somewhat dysfunctional. There are no exceptions. Now, there's a rescue plan that God has for that, but it'll never wipe it all away. And we're looking at the book of Genesis in chapter 27, verses 18 through 46. Last week we looked at Isaac's blessing of Jacob when he wanted to bless Esau instead, and the plot, this dysfunctional plot with Rebekah and Jacob, and we're going to look at that in a little more detail today. Just to let you see some of the order that goes back to Genesis chapter 25, here we have the death of Abraham after Abraham dies after marrying Keturah after the death of Sarah. And then at 20, Esau sells, he's 20 years old, he sells his birthright to Jacob for a pot of stew. And like his father, Isaac has disputes over well rights when he goes into the land. And Jacob deceives his blind father, that's where we are today, Isaac, into giving him the blessing instead of Esau. And then it goes on, and we'll get to this at 45. Jacob is sent away from angry Esau to find a wife, and on the way he has a dream. We'll get to that next week. But just so that you know, that's kind of what's happening. So I've entitled this, God Bless My Dysfunctional Family. And Jacob and Rebekah deceive Isaac. This is an interesting story. It's not unlike stories you hear in the news of very, very dysfunctional families, or even some of the slight family dysfunction that you and I may have. And Jacob lies to Isaac, his father, twice in this passage. We pick it up in Genesis chapter 27 and verse 18. He went to his father, that is Jacob, and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" "I am Jacob." And Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn." So he's lying to him. Now, if you go in the earlier part of the chapter, you realize that this was a plot by Rebekah. Jacob was a little reluctant and kind of said, "You know what, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to fool my father Isaac." But Rebekah says, "Do you let me take care of that? I'll cook the stew, I'll do all the things. I'll dress you up in Esau's clothing so you smell like Esau." And so he says, "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" And Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn," the first lie. "I have done as you have told me." In the earlier part of the chapter, Isaac wanted to be able to bless Esau, and so he wanted to send him out to hunt and get some game. "Please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing." So it's Jacob, but Isaac thinks it's Esau. Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son? How did you find this game so quickly?" And the second lie, "The Lord your God gave me success." Now that's a terrible lie. That's just a rotten lie. Blaming it on God, attributing it to God in this lie. But this is the kind of person that Jacob was. His name means deceiver or supplanter, or one who would trip you up. Now, we're going to see, he learns a lesson later, and he gets so much better with his faith. And you got to understand, this Jacob, his name is going to be changed to Israel, and he's going to be the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. So a whole nation is going to come out of him. As we continue, Isaac is deceived by his senses because he failed to rely on God's promise. Now, what was God's promise? Way back earlier, a couple of chapters earlier in Genesis, when Rebekah is pregnant, she's wanting to know the meaning of the twins, Isaac and Jacob. I mean, not Isaac, Esau and Jacob. Now, Esau was the older one, and he came out first, and Jacob came out grasping his heel. But you remember the prediction? And Rebekah shared this prediction with Isaac. The prediction was that the older one, Esau, would serve the younger one, Jacob. And God had just reversed that in his blessing. God can do that. That's a choice that God can make. But here all along, Isaac refused to do that because he had a tradition. The tradition is, I should bless my oldest son, Esau. And he was stubborn in that, even though he knew God's promise. And he was literally rebelling against God and the change that God had made. And if he was walking by faith instead of by his senses, he would have known to do that. And so Isaac is deceived by his senses because he failed to rely on the truth of God's promise. God made a statement, and he should have followed that, and he should have set his boys down, and he should have said, now Jacob, this is the way it's going to be. Esau, this is the way it's going to be. Esau, I know you're the older one, but you're going to serve Jacob, and you better learn to deal with it. But he didn't do that, and he allowed the family dysfunction to continue. Verse 21, then Isaac said to Jacob, come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not. So it's a whole family dysfunction and a whole subterfuge of deceit. Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, the voice is the voice of Jacob. He recognized that. But the hands are the hands of Esau. Remember, Rebekah wrapped hairy leather on the back of his hands, on the back of his neck, and everything else because Jacob was a smooth, clean-shaven man, and Esau was a hairy, red-headed type of individual, rugged, outdoors, lots of hair on his arms. And so this was the deceit that was taking place. Can you imagine that kind of deceit? Rebekah for Isaac and deceiving him, because it was dysfunctional for her too. She had a favorite. Her favorite was Jacob. Isaac's favorite was Esau. And they let that get in the way of the family. He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, so he proceeded to bless him. And he stopped in the middle of things and he said, are you really my son, Esau? And Jacob said, I am. He replied, I am. He lied to him again. Now here's the problem. When physical appetite is the wrong basis of blessing, when faith isn't the basis of blessing, when physical appetite is, all I can get materially, all I can get to satisfy my senses in life, that's what they were talking about. And that was the mistake that Isaac made. Then he said, my son, bring me some of your game to eat. I like eating that stew that you make, so that I may give you my blessing. Jacob, who he thought was Esau, brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, come here, my son, and kiss me. That was a tradition, that he'd kiss him on the cheek or give him a hug. So he went to him and kissed him. When Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. You ever tell your kid you smell like a field? But that was apparently a compliment in that situation. And here's Esau, a ruddy outdoorsman, and Isaac is saying, you smell like the outdoors. You smell like a field, and I love that smell, and I love that stew. And I'm basing everything here on physical appetite, on my sense of smell, my sense of taste, even though he knew it was the voice of Jacob. Bible Knowledge Commentary says, Jacob deceived his father and obtained the blessing. Prodded by his mother, Jacob lied twice to his father. First, about his identity. He said, I am Esau. And second, that God had given him success in hunting. 3 times the old man voiced his suspicion, but deceived by his senses of touch and smell, he blessed Jacob, thinking he was Esau. Well, what did Isaac want to do in the first place anyway? He didn't want to give the first blessing. There was a certain portion, if you were a firstborn son in Israel, you got a double portion of the blessing. He didn't want to give that to Jacob. Even though God had said that's the way the promise is going to go, he fought against God. He rebelled against God. And he wanted to bless Esau because it was a dysfunctional family, and Esau was his favorite, and Jacob was Rebekah's favorite. Bible Knowledge Commentary again. The blessing included prosperity in crops, domination over other nations and his brothers, cursing on those who cursed him, and blessing on those who blessed him. It's basically a restatement of God's promise to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, and then later God's promise of blessing to Isaac, and Isaac is passing that blessing on. He thinks to Esau, but it turns out by God's plan, ultimately, it's to Jacob. Here's the content, more content of the blessing. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's riches. Wow. That's an abundance of grain and new wine. May God bless you materially. May nations serve you. May you have power, and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. Now he's thinking, this is Esau I'm talking to. So Jacob would bow down to him, but God in the beginning, before they were even born, and Paul reiterates this in the book of Romans, before they were even born, God said, the older is going to serve the younger. Esau is going to serve Jacob. And so here is dysfunctional Isaac thwarting, or trying to thwart all of this, thinking he's giving that blessing to Esau. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. Again, that restatement of the Abrahamic covenant. And then the story of this dysfunction and deception comes out. It's realized. Verse 30, after Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. And he said to them, my father, please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing. His father Isaac asked him, who are you? I am your son, he answered, your firstborn, Esau, still trying to claim that birthright. Now, at this point, Isaac goes into shock. And none of this should ever have happened if Isaac, as a man of faith, had just sat down and explained to his boys what God was doing, the way God was doing it, giving them that heritage, and Esau would have had to deal with the situation, and Jacob would have had to not gloat over the situation. But Dad didn't intervene. They were dysfunctional. Verse 33, Isaac trembled violently. You can imagine this old man just shaking, realizing what he's done. Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed, because you couldn't take back that blessing. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, bless me too, my father. Now there was a secondary blessing. There was what might be called a leftover blessing, but he had asked for it. But here they were. Isaac is all upset, trembling, nervous. But why would he be that way? He was supposed to bless Jacob, the younger. He was supposed to go along by faith with God's plan, even though God's plan was reversed from the culture. Sometimes God turns culture on its ear. Now here's the other question that Esau asked. Was the birthright taken or given away? And I want to remind you of that. But he said, your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. It was deceitful at that point. Esau said, isn't he rightly named Jacob? That is, deceiver or supplanter or one who trips up. This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. Now think about that statement. He didn't take advantage of him in the first place. Remember what happened? Esau comes in. He says, I'm hungry. I'd like some of that stew. Jacob says, okay, I'll make you a deal. This was a negotiation. This was not deceit. I'll make you a deal. You sell me your birthright as the firstborn, and I'll give you some of that stew. And Esau said, well, sure, it doesn't matter because I'm going to starve to death here anyway, so what good's a birthright going to do me if I die? Now, Esau's interpretation is he deceived me. He didn't deceive him. He gave him a deal. You give me this for this, I'll give you this for this. But now Esau is saying this is the second time he's taken advantage of me. So poor Esau is feeling sorry for himself. He took my birthright. No, he didn't. Esau gave it away. And now he's taken my blessing. Well, that might be true. But it was the blessing that God said was supposed to go to Jacob anyway. And the whole family thing is just dysfunctional. Then he asked, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? He's saying to Isaac. Esau is saying, is there something that you can do since you gave away the main blessing? Now, I want to suggest to you that ultimately God is in charge of real blessing, not manipulated blessing. And in verse 37, Isaac answered Esau, I have made him, that is Jacob, Lord over you, and have made all his relatives his servants. I have sustained him with grain and new wine. I put the blessing on him. So what can I possibly do for you, my son? Esau said to his father, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. Then Esau wept aloud. And it's interesting, because it says when Esau traded away his birthright, he wept. And at this point, he wept. And the book of Hebrews says no matter how much he wept, he couldn't reverse the circumstances. What was done was done. He lost the blessing. And he should have just accommodated the family and gotten along and worked with it. But here he is, and he's weeping, and he's saying, give me some kind of blessing as well. Now here's what I call the leftover blessing for Esau. I don't know if you want this blessing. I'm not nuts about it. Verse 39, his father Isaac answered him, your dwelling will be away from earth's richness. Is that a way of saying you're going to be poor? He didn't end up poor, but he's saying it's going to be away from earth's richness. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard life for you, Esau. Esau, by the way, is the head of the Edomites, and when you get to the New Testament and you find Herod was an Edomite, and so that whole lineage goes down there across from the Dead Sea on the Jordanian side of Israel. You will live by the sword, so you're not going to have peace, and you will serve your brother. Some blessing, huh? But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. So there's going to be some kind of nomadic independence that Esau has, and if you trace out the family, that's what you find in a lot of their history. Now Esau furthers the family dysfunction when he vows to kill Jacob. He is so angry at his brother at this point, and none of this needed to happen. Isaac needed to explain, to take care of the family dysfunction. He needed to direct these boys' faith toward God, and he didn't do that. In fact, he rebelled against God, even though he was a man of faith and was receiving the promises. Verse 41, Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near. He's going to die. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. A lot of family dysfunction there. When Rebekah was told what her older son Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you. You know, it's like you have a bulletin board and you post the family news. Look out, Jacob, Esau's about to kill you. And all this happened because Rebekah was dishonest and dysfunctional. They didn't listen to the promise of God, and Isaac favored one over the other just as Rebekah did. Do you have a favorite in your family? Be careful. Be careful. Make sure that you pay apt attention to all of your children. And it's hard because we do. I mean, it's easier if you have a child that's like you or different from you to get closer to that child sometime. But here was a total family dysfunction. And you know what? Does that encourage you? Not that you're going to trot through life being dysfunctional, but it encourages you is that God calls these people of faith and blesses them and promises them things, and we don't understand why, because Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Esau, all the way down the line with Moses and the 12 tribes, they failed, they're dysfunctional, they fail. Guess what? I can be somewhat dysfunctional as well. I'm not glorifying it. I'm saying it's part of my broken nature and your broken nature. And here's Esau planning to avenge and murder his brother. So Rebekah intercedes to send Jacob to safety. And here's how she does it. Verse 43. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. That's all the way up in the northern part. We'll show you in a moment. By Turkey. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. That may be never. You ever think about that? He came back. But when your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. So on that day, she lost both of her sons. One went to Haran for a while, and Esau was basically dispersed. Why should I lose both of you in one day? And then the chapter concludes with this. More family dysfunction. Rebekah's disgust with her daughter-in-laws. Now I want you to see what happened. Then Rebekah said to Isaac, I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. Well, what's the story of the Hittite women? Esau, instead of keeping the family line clear and going up to Haran and marrying someone from up there in the Turkey area where the family was from, married two pagan women in the area there where they lived. And God had said, you shouldn't do that. You should choose from your own family, because God was, through Jesus Christ, trying to preserve a royal line. That's why Jacob is going to be sent in the next chapter to go up to Rebekah's brother Laban and find a wife. And in fact, more family dysfunction, he finds two wives. And if you want a family dysfunction, have two wives. See how much fun that can be. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from the Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living. Was she a drama queen? Oh my goodness, yes. My life is over. My life is just over because of those Hittite women. My gosh. Get it together, girl. But that's the way she felt. And so, she sent Jacob away. But it's just filled with family dysfunction. Bible Knowledge Commentary says, Rebekah told Jacob about Esau's anger and urged him to go immediately to her brother Laban in Haran. Again, deceiving her husband for the sake of her son, she expressed disgust with her two Hittite daughter-in-laws, Judas and Bathmith. Now remember, they were false worshipers. They didn't worship Jehovah, and Esau had married them, and urged Isaac to let Jacob get a wife from their own people. That was a good move. In that way, Jacob could flee with Isaac's blessing. There would be an understanding of why he was going, and Isaac didn't need to know all this tension with Esau and Jacob. Now, just so you have an idea, here's where they are, down in the area of Beersheba, Hebron, whatever. Jacob's going to go, he's going to make a stop in the next chapter in Bethel and worship the Lord and learn some things, but he's going to go all the way up here to Turkey, between the Tigris and Euphrates River, to Haran, because that's where Rebekah's brother Laban lived. And he's going to be up there for a number of years, just to give you an idea of the geography. Now I want to conclude with this. How to deal with my own dysfunction. How you deal with your dysfunction. And if you deny that you're dysfunctional to some extent, then you're lying to yourself. And I'm lying to myself. But I want to give you a couple quick principles. Since the fall, as I said at the beginning, all families are somewhat dysfunctional. I don't care who you are, you have dysfunction. That's part of having a sin nature. That's part of the fall of mankind. If you can exercise faith or you can lie, the propensity is going to be to lie to get your way out of it, just like the patriarchs did. The propensity is going to be to cushion yourself with whatever dysfunctionality. And many of you have come out of really dysfunctional homes, or dysfunctional marriages, or dysfunctional family situations. And here's the remedy. Christians, as new creations, finally have the potential not to eliminate dysfunction. I'm always going to be, till the day I die, till the Lord calls me home, I am going to be somewhat dysfunctional. But being a new creation, I'm able to exercise faith, and I have the potential to lessen the dysfunction, because I can deal honestly with you because Christ has my back. And you can do the same. And that's the beauty of what lessens dysfunction. But people without Jesus Christ, they may be seemingly very normal, but they don't really have that new creation capacity to overcome this ultimately. They may improve, they may get counseling, there's a lot of secular stuff out there and self-help books, and they might do better with it without being Christians. And there are Christians who remain dysfunctional. They never exercise the faith they need to. They never realize they're new creations. And they just go through life and they have the label of Christian on them, but they're still very, very dysfunctional. Unless you apply this by faith and realize, God, I'm broken, I'm dysfunctional, you're the only cure for me in Jesus Christ, then you have a potential. And dysfunction is healed as we seek God's blessing. But here's the parameter. God's blessing, God's way, in God's power. Not by manipulating it, not by you and I doing what we want to do. It's by doing what God wants us to do. It heals that dysfunctionality. And you can arrest several generations of dysfunctional family behavior by exercising faith. If Isaac had only done that, if Isaac had only told the promise and the plan of God and helped his boys exercise faith, it would have been a different set of circumstances.